Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I will be showing you how you can share variables and use functions between different JavaScript files in your browser. So I hope you stay tuned. Alright, so I'm going to be teaching you how to share files and more importantly, share variables, share functions, share objects, just share data between two JavaScript files. If you're doing vanilla JavaScript and you're not using Babel or anything, it's just straight JavaScript and your file is getting relatively big, you're probably asking yourself, like, how do I split my files up into different segments, right? It's just more maintainable that way. So I'll show you the old way and then I'll show you the more modern way. So let's start off with the old way that they used to do it. So let's say you had a main.js file over here, and in your body you would just bring it in, so it's main.js. So if we save that, we see that it's pulling the script in, so it's printing out hello. So now let's say we had another file and it was called chunk.js over here, and inside chunk.js I wanted to pull out a function that I want to use in main.js. So I'll just say function sum a and b, and it will just return a plus b. So we have this. Now the tricky part is, how do I get this in this file over here? In the old days, oh, what did I do over here? I say old days like it was like 20 years ago, but previously you would have to do this. So you would have to just keep pulling in another script file called chunk.js. You would have to pull that in as well in your HTML. And this is not the best way to do it because you could easily break it. For example, if I save this right now, and now I go to main.js and I say console log sum, given that now I can use it, 1 and 2. If I save that, it says uncaught reference, sum is not a function. So how can we fix that? We actually just put our chunk above the main chunk, and now that fixes it. So now we see a 3 over here. So we're getting our chunk, but even this isn't very scalable. So imagine every chunk that you would have, a new chunk that you would have to make, you would just have to keep going over and over again. And then you can see this problem where you're just getting a lot of chunks again and again and again. So there's this new kid on the block. It's called EsModules. So over here, let me full screen this. If you go to caniuse.com, EsModules has a 92% availability in the browser space. So if you want to support IE11, tough luck. If you don't have that specification, then you can definitely use this. A bunch of modern browsers have support for EsModules, and all you have to do to enable it is say type is equal to module. So let's do that right now. So what that looks like is, so from my main source, I will just say type is equal to module. I will save that, nothing has been broken. And then inside my main.js, all I have to do now is say import sum from, and then I point to the file, so chunk.js. So now let me save that, and it says the requested module chunk does not have a provided export. That's good. That means it's actually doing its thing. So now what we have to do in our chunk is we have to explicitly export it. So this is really cool because before you would write all these files and then you would put the script tag in the HTML and it would expose everything. You might not even need to expose everything. So this way you have a more controlled way of exposing this. So now you say export default, and I save that, and now I see I don't have that problem. And over here, export default function, over here, And then in the main.js, I'm pulling in that sum. So now what I have to do is I can remove this requirement for chunk, and now you see that it is working exactly the way it was working before. So what have we changed? We have just exported now our function. So now we say export default function sum, and then in our main.js we just say, hey, I want to import sum from chunk.js, and you can pretty much use it. So you can do this with anything now. So now let's just export something else. Let's export an object. Export const object is equal to hello world, and let's save that. And in main.js, I would just have to pull that in over here. So object, nice IntelliSense as well, and instead of hello, I will just print out the object as well. And I save that, and I see hello world over here. For a few of you that don't know what's the difference between export default and export const. So export default, it pretty much doesn't name your export. So what I mean by that is over here, I'm pulling in sum. So here's another thing, you can only export one default because it's in the name. So export this by default. That's pretty much what it's saying. So let me comment this out for a little bit. And let me save that and go back to object over here. Save that and then comment that out. So let me save this over here. So now this sum I can rename it to anything. I can say adder, and over here I can just reference that by saying adder. And I save that, and you see that the function still works over here. The difference between default and export default and just export is that export default, you can only do it once. So I can only export one default variable function, but with export const, I can export many, but these are specifically named, and I have to destructure them from the import over here. And what I mean by that is, to pull out the object, I would have to put curly brackets and say obj, and over here I would have to save that, and I can see it, and I can make another one called object2 and world2 over here, save that, and then I can pull as many as I need to using the export, just the keyword export. So over here I can see hello and world. I can export as many just using the regular keyword export, and only export one just for default, and I can just rename this to be anything. So what's cool about EsModules is that if I check my network tab, it pulls in the required stuff. It pulls in the required script files that I need. So over here, if I go to JS, and let me clear this over here, and I empty my cache, it pulls in main.js, and then it pulls in chunk.js. Usually the only way to do that is if you had a script tag present in your HTML. But now browsers have become much smarter, and JavaScript has evolved into a whole new beast that this just comes out of the box. Like it's just given that you would need this. So that's pretty cool. One thing else I want to show you is how you can dynamically load content. This also has its pitfalls using EsModules, but it comes with a neat trick. So for example, what I mean by that is, let's say, again, like you have a lot of chunks, right? And it keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. This might break or this might not. Yes, this will definitely break. But if you go to your network tab, it will be pulling every single JavaScript file down at the same time, and that might not be the best suited for your use case. Like that's just going to take up unnecessary bandwidth, especially if the user doesn't need that JavaScript file at that moment. So what's even cooler is that you can use something called dynamic imports. So let's take a look at that. So let's go to can I use? And it has the same usage as EsModules. So if you're using EsModules, you can most likely use dynamic imports. And let's see how what that looks like. And again, the whole point of dynamic imports is that I'm going to need this JavaScript file later, not now, not when I'm trying to load my my file. So what does that look like? So let me remove this. I don't need it. What you will need to start off with is say import, import, and then you would have to point to your chunk.js. And this is actually a promise. So then you can promise chain it. I'll just call this a module, and it will be an arrow function for the module. And essentially now I pulled in that module, so now I want to use it. So I'll say console log. Actually, first let me cons destructure this. I think it'll be much easier. So I'll say object1, object2, and then default actually might not work. Yeah, default won't work. So what I'll do is I'll just destructure object1 and object2 over here, and I'll say const adder is equal to adder is equal to module.default. Again, remember how we default exported? So this is the same way you can access it. So now we can pull this up over here, and let me go to my browser and see if everything works. So if we go to console and we save this, everything works exactly the way we want it to. And if we go to the network tab over here, let's go to the network tab, clear this, reload. You can't really see right now, the chunk is being deferred. We don't really need it at that moment. It's getting asynchronously called. So a way we can see this in action is if we can just put it in a set timeout. So we will put this in a set timeout. Again, we're going to act like we don't need this file right now. We'll just put it in a set timeout for 2 seconds, and we'll just move it in here. And now let me clear this and save. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Clear this and save. And over here, see, we just have our main.js file, and then 2 seconds later, our chunk.js file just follows right behind it. And you can use this amazingly. So this just proves that you can now only download the JS chunks you need at that moment. And as you're going along in your application, let's say some button click will trigger you getting the getting a new module, and that gets more modules. You can really split your code up in the most performant way to get the best bang for your buck. And that is pretty much everything you need to know to get started with EsModules. Again, it's an amazing feature. I do highly recommend it over going to your index.html and just copy pasting script tags over and over again just to get a simple task working. So I hope everyone found this video helpful. If you did, leave a like and a subscribe on this channel. It really goes a long way. And let me know what you want to see in the next video, and I will try to put that out there. But in the meanwhile, peace out.